offer these free thanks to American TESOL. We are also running a ESL tech course, and for members of American TESOL, you can get a teaching with technology certification. And if you're not part of American TESOL, you can still sign up for the course. But you can also receive a certificate of attendance. So you can find all the resources at ShellyTarrell.com, tech tips, and if you go to the American TESOL blogger site and the YouTube channel, you can find all of the recordings. We have over 200. And just to let you know, we are starting our next series of tech course. So this is going to be the first one in our tech course. You can join at any time. That's the way it's set up. So we're going to look at survival tips for teaching with technology. And I recently updated this today because I've done this presentation before, and over 40,000 people have actually seen it. So that's quite an honor. But technology is changing every day. There are new tools every single day that or tools that we love are getting updates. And because the technology is changing so fast, it's great that we are able to come together and see some of the updates to save you time and to save you headaches as a teacher. So some of the things you might see today, you may already know. But what I want you to do is just take 2 or 3 resources or tips and that you're really excited about, that jump out at you, and try those, or try at least one thing new. The great thing about technology, especially for teachers, is that it has so much potential. It provides or empowers you as a teacher to really support your learners, especially if you're working with language learners or you're trying to diversify your instruction. And the reason is because there are so many web tools that that provide your students with the ability to be able to get into the learning hands-on and to be able to find a tool that helps them visualize what they're learning. A lot of times when we teach students, we don't have a context. A lot of times they just hear a voice or they may read it in a book, but they really don't get immersed in the learning. So technology is really powerful for helping your learners get excited, engaged, and curious. You can find many of my tips in my books. I'm an author, and so I've written many of these tips in Learning to Go, my book, and then the 30 Goals Challenge for Teachers. So I have some background when it comes to training teachers in technology. So let's get to the tips. What are these survival tips? One of the tips is, well, one of the first one is to get to know your students. So it's good to ask our students what they're currently using, what they want to use. Some of my best technology tools and apps that I've learned to use are actually taught, my students introduced me to them. And as a teacher, I always, or even a trainer, I walk into it thinking, what can I learn from my participants today? And it's important you do that. The reason is because you're teaching, and when you're teaching, you have to know your learner because they're the ones receiving. But they're also part of that learning process. In fact, they're the biggest part of that learning process because they get to choose and they get to decide what they take from you. And so it's important that we establish relationships and we get to know about them and their technology use. A lot of times our technology use colors what we use in the classroom. So what we know is usually what we tend to use. But you can ask your students. I have this free student technology use survey. You can go to the Google Forms and you can copy it, and then you can create your own questions with it. So it's not complete, but I've used this before with my students. I used to use it in Microsoft Word to ask them about what kind of technologies they use and how they learn language, since I am a language teacher. The second tip is, well, as a teacher, even if you're a new teacher and even as a learner, You've learned with different tools and the changes. You've been through so many different transitions. So don't get scared by the technology because you're used to it. You've worked with different tools. You've worked with chalkboards maybe, and then you had to transition to maybe a smart board, or maybe you had to learn how to use a digital camera, or even VCRs to DVDs. So you have gone through the process of learning with a new tool and adjusting to it. For some reason, we tend to get scared when we use different tools in the classroom because it changes so quickly, but it's still the same experience. And what we need to focus on, what doesn't really change that much, is the learning process. So it's important that we focus on the pedagogy and we understand what it is, our mission, our objectives. What do we want our learners to be able to achieve and do? And of course, they're part of that process. They get to decide too. Oh, I want to learn how to um, do fractions because one day I'm going to be a skateboarder, or maybe they'll make my plane. I have to learn angles because it'll make me do better in sports and different things like that. And you can really tie all types of learning to your students' passions and what really excites them. So it's important that we focus on that. In my different resources, you'll be able to find a, a lot on different types of digital pedagogy. So I don't preach one particular pedagogy. What I think is really great to do is actually explore a few options. You have the SAMR model. As you can see here, this is a really great one that is, you can see this visualization that Sylvia Duckworth did on the SAMR, and that's a theory of integrating technology, how you can approach it and go about it. I learned a lot from Steve Wheeler, who is at Timbukteeth on SlideShare, also on Twitter. And he teaches me so much about integrating technology and really makes me question what I do and think about its application and how I'm working with students. Andrew Churches has a lot of information on digital blooms and using blooms, and integrating tech with blooms. He even has resources in Spanish. You can find, of course, different other theories that talk about different features of learning online and together, such as connectivism, that is founded by Stephen Downes and George, and you can find a lot of information. So if you just go to the ShellyTerrell.com tech tips, you'll be able to go to the Pearl Trees and you'll be able to find lots and lots of resources relating to that foundation in pedagogy. And there is one of my favorite theories when it comes to teaching with technology, and that's pedagogy. Now, why do we learn these theories? Because they give us insight on how to design our courses and what we can do with the technology to be able to have our students learn together and really be engaged. And so the theory that has really supported my instructional design is pedagogy.org. And this is actually a bunch of educators came together and they created this free ebook that you can get at pedagogy.org. And it really talks about crowdsource learning. It talks about how we learn with others and how to create what kind of virtual learning environment or spaces that we have online can really support learning from each other. So part of this pedagogy, of course, is you have to have a learning management system or a virtual learning environment. And there are so many different tools that support a student's learning online. And this doesn't mean that it's teaching online. What it means is that you can have a blended instruction too. You can do both. You can have where you have your classroom instruction, but you also have a virtual learning environment where your students can go and they can access your resources, assignments. Now, you might think, well, this is a lot of extra work and I don't have time. But I found this is actually one of the things that I did for an action research project for my master's in curriculum instruction ESL about 5 years ago. And what I tried to do was build this platform. Back then, the platforms were not as great as the ones you have now. The ones now are really incredible. They save you so much time. But the great thing about it is it actually saves you time. So you invest the time now, but much later you'll be able to you'll be able to duplicate those courses. So it's not like you have to continue to make materials. You can use many of the same resources and organization and structure each year. And what I actually find is that it helps students as well. They become a part of it, and if you really have them participate and take ownership roles within the platform, then you can save yourself a lot of time. So these are some of the ones teachers love. I have a lot of experience with Moodle. And then, of course, I've created blogs, and there are different types of, a lot of teachers like Edmodo and Schoology. And of course, I've used wikis a lot, and I really love Weebly. Weebly has been a great tool. So you can use a mix match of all of these tools and even other tools, or you can decide to use just one platform. Another part of pedagogy or learning together is you can bookmark. So just like you bookmark your favorites on your computer, you can do this socially. You can do this with other people. And this is one of the greatest examples of learning with others. You can have your students do this as well. If you build or start the bookmarking process, and you would fill it up with your course content, you can put up your syllabus, you can put up rules. I mean, you can use all of that as bookmarks as well. Now, these are my favorite tools to use. There are other ones as well, but I think these work really well, and I've used them in different courses, and they've really gotten my students to create the content with me, and that's part of pedagogy as well, that the students get to also change the content. They get to say, hey, I found this really interesting resource or this great TED talk talking about science, and I want to add that to our bookmarks. And you might say, yes, I think that's a really great, thank you so much for finding this for us. So, or as another student might say, I found this great game on how to use, how to practice grammar. And you might say, wow, that's a great game. We're going to add that to our bookmarks. And so you can do that quite easily with Pearl Trees, Digo. You can create groups in Digo, Pinterest, Storify, EduClipper, LifeBinders, Listly, Scuba. All of these places have where you can do collaborative bookmark, and they're free as well. So what does this look like in practice? Well, there are so many different ways that you can integrate technology, and here are a few ideas. You can have your students, instead of writing essays, they can write blogs, or instead of keeping a journal, they can keep a blog. They can take notes online. They can use mind mapping tools. They can create podcasts. They can create videos. And within each of these ideas are even more ideas. You can have them create infographics. They can create not only podcasts, but maybe they create a radio show. Maybe they create a silent film. So there are so many different ways that you can integrate technology and achieve your goals while engaging students. Now that you have some ideas, well, you have to find the right tool. Which tool or app? That actually depends on you. So I can't stay here and say, this is the tool you should always use, or because I don't know your teaching situation. You know your teaching situation best. And so you will be able to decide what your students have access to, if you're using Chromebooks, if you're using Android devices, if you're using iPads. You know what your learners, their needs, and you also know your needs. And so the best kind of way to find the right tool is to have a search engine that really that allows you to do that, to say, I teach third graders with Chromebooks, and I want a free app to so they can practice their writing. You can do that. It's called edshelf.com, or you can go to graphite.org, and they are basically like search engines where you enter criteria and they come up with all of these teacher recommended free tools and apps. Sometimes they recommend those that cost, but for the most part, they're free. They also give you reviews and let you know a little about the tool. But they also, if you create a free account, you can collect these tools. Let's say that you find some that you love and you want to categorize them because there's so many, for example, comic creation tools. Then you can create a little board that has your favorite comic creation tools. So these are really great resources or places to go find these tools. You can get ideas on what to do. Let's say you actually fall in love with a tool, and I think that's okay. There's a lot of tools that I've fall in love with, and then I come up with ideas because I'm so inspired by that tool. I think both are okay. I think that you can get inspired to teach whatever excites you as a teacher. I disagree with tech trainers who say it's not about the tool, or don't get excited about the tool, because anything that excites you as a teacher is a good thing. um, and ilearntechnology.com. Kelly Tinkley has created many digital bloom. She has a live binders with digital blooms, and she gives you tool recommendations for the different what you want your students to achieve. So these are places, and there are many more in the bookmarks. One of the easiest ways to integrate technology is to simply get one of those lessons or projects that your students love. So if you can type in the chat box right now, what is it, one of the ideas or projects or activities that you have your students do that they really enjoy? What is your favorite, or one of your favorite lessons or projects to teach? You can share that with us in the chat box. But when you think of that lesson or project, then the next step is to simply integrate a digital tool. One of the easiest ways to do this is to start with a digital poster. Many of us have our students create posters for different subjects. They can do a science fair poster, or they might do a poster showing um, different types of research. I mean, we have them create posters or present what they research, and it's quite easy to use a tool such as Canva, TAC, Bunsy, ThingLink, Pictochart, any of these, to get your students to really present that information. And the great thing about it is your students don't have to lug it around. They don't have to, it doesn't get destroyed in the bus. And you don't have to throw these at the end of the year, these beautiful posters. And um, you don't get glitter all over your classroom. So that's an additional bonus as well. I think sometimes when you're integrating technology, it's going to fail you. You're going to have a lot of stressful times, but that's with anything as a teacher. Teaching is a tough job. So it's something that we have to realize when we go into the field, that we have a tough mission ahead of us. But there are different ways to make that easier. One of the first things to do, and I think it's really great advice that you get from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is don't panic. Too many times I've gone to presentations, or I've gone to I've been in a class, and the teacher is so so gung-ho in getting the technology to work that the learning opportunity is missed. So it's important that if it doesn't work in the first 5 minutes, you can assign a student or you can get someone to look at it, but continue with the learning, because those students or the teachers that you train went and are sharing their time with you so they can learn from you. So if you make it about just making the technology work, then you're giving them the wrong message. You're not giving providing them the value of what you have to share. So there are ways to avoid this. Check the technology before you decide to present or decide to conduct a lesson or training. And it's important that you check it pretty much close to the time. So even though you checked it 5 hours before, I have found that you need to check it around 30 minutes to an hour before. And even then, you may have to teach, you may struggle with some problems. I recently, I was last month, and I just finished a report for a project I did in Venezuela, training teachers, and everything was set up, and it was because the previous lesson I hadn't done a great job of setting it up, setting the technology up. And so I had everything planned, and then the electricity went out. So then I had to teach without electricity. So you never know what is going to happen. But we continued with the learning, and it really we had a really fantastic, great lesson. So when you're looking at fixing the problem, these are some kind of troubleshooting points that I have found have worked for me in the last since 1996. Did you shut it down, unplug it, reboot it, Google the problem, ask for help? A lot of times, if I reboot, turn it off, everything, unplug it, and reboot, it works again. So um, and if it doesn't work after that, well, you can have your students learn the different tools. Have tech support. Your students are there to learn. One of the best ways to integrate technology is get them to be the experts. And whenever something goes wrong with VoiceThread or using Canva or using Buncee or ThingLink, then you can have different students who have been assigned as tech leaders or tech support for those tools. I would recommend having 2 or 3 because someone might be absent. And what you can do is at the beginning of the semester, you can have them create tutorials. They can create visual tutorials, or they can create video screen tutorials, and they can even they can share them with the rest of the staff so you can have training for the rest of your teachers. And of course, you should always have a backup plan. And if it doesn't require technology, even better. So that way you can go on with the learning no matter what. And this is something that's been really important and 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 it really has helped me be flexible and really continue with the learning as a trainer and a teacher. I always have a backup plan, and there are different teachers who suggest different things. One of them is Naomi. She did this as part of the 30 Goals Challenge because that was one of the challenges. The 30 goals was to integrate technology effectively. Well, how do we do that? Well, we have backup plans. And so she talks about teaching in Israel to deaf students and how she uses the computer with no internet connection. You can get one of the best ways that I have become a great teacher is because I have the support, ideas, creativity of millions, including you in the chat box today. And this is what you call a personal passion learning networks. This goes back to connectivism and how we learn with others online. How do you connect with other teachers online? Well, you can at the conferences that you attend, exchange Instagram, exchange Pinterest, exchange Voxers, whatever social networks you use now, you can find teachers. A lot of times you can search hashtags, you can search EdChat, You can search for EdChat or education or teachers with a pound sign, a hashtag, and you can find teachers on there. See what they share. If you like it, follow them. So I'm going to give you a few hashtags that I recommend, so you can find many different teachers in the social networks that you use. If you attend online conferences, that's a really great way, and webinars, to be able to get connected with other teachers. So right now you can come, you can share your Twitter handle, you can share where you're connected. Peggy George on Saturdays, she has a live 20 classroom, and you can meet a lot of teachers there as well. ITEFL is on right now, and you can go and ITEFL online. You can meet a lot of English language teachers that way. So there's always events and places you can connect with different teachers. One of the most important parts of integrating technology is you have to get parent permission. You got to include them in the conversation. That's a whole other webinar. You can find it when you go to my survival tips. I have some on parents. One of the documents that is, I think, very important, although there has been debate on this, is getting students to sign and parents to sign responsible use policies. Now, it's always adapting, but I think it's really important, especially now, to have certain things documented. I think that this helps support you legally. These documents, you can see different examples in my bookmarks, but I think if you get students to write down a list of what they plan to do with the technology, responsible use of technology, I will support and I think they're great as I will statements. I will, or I promise to, or I plan to, use the technology. I will take care of the technology. I will put back the technology. I will, whatever it is that they should do, and you can get with them at the beginning, and you can come up with these codes of conduct, and then have your students sign it. Say, look. And what I used to do is, anytime they would mess up, because they're students, they're kids, they're going to, I would show them what they had signed up, what they had told me they would do, and I would point at it, and it was that simple. And they would take responsibility, and then usually an acceptable use policy outlines what happens if they break those codes of conduct. And so I think it's really important, so parents don't run into the room yelling or say you were unfair or you treated my child much differently. And the reason why parents do that is because they don't have we don't have these conversations with them at the beginning. And so it's important that we include them in that conversation so they understand what is expected. And it also helps them be comfortable. You're letting them know how you're going to protect their child. It's important to cover digital citizenship and literacy every day. Digital literacy and citizenship, every time you use the technology, goes hand in hand. It's not a separate lesson. It's as simple as getting your students to think about, okay, we're creating this, we're publishing it online. How is your presentation? Are you ready for an audience to see it? Are you ready to share this? How is it going to help how is it going to help others learn? And you can make them think and reflect on their digital behavior. And I think that's really important. Is this going to pollute? Is this going to send digital pollution? Is this going to be negative? Is this choice going to negatively impact society? Or is it going to have is it going to spread good values like happiness or excitement or curiosity? How do you manage all this? Well, here's a few classroom management tips. We have webinars that talk about each of these different steps. So you can actually we have over 200 webinars and recordings, and you can go back and you can look at these if you want to learn more. I think learning stations are fantastic. They've really helped me manage my class. Group work, and when you have group work, it's important that each student has a role and each student has a duty and responsibility. You can create these at the beginning of the year. You can have these as little cards, and then you facilitate. You're there to help guide them, get them curious, get them excited about what you're teaching, because you must love your subject matter if you're teaching it. Well, we hope you do. And so those tips have worked for me. I also create a lot of calendars. The calendars are very formulaic for the most part. I know there are different events like pep rallies or holidays, and so it can't always be that way. But we usually always have journals every single day, so they know every other week their journal is due. You can put this on Google Calendar. They put it on Google Calendar, and then they can have access to it. And it's easy to adapt it each year. In fact, I have a Google Calendar document you can easily adapt by the month. If you change the month, then it updates. So it's pretty easy. It's a spreadsheet, so you can use that. I have a lot of templates. They're free to use to make your life easier. You can have it to where your students, you have who's the station leader that week. And I try to get students to do different tasks each week. We always have someone in charge of announcements. We have someone in charge of the bulletin board, someone in charge of the word wall, someone in charge of collecting. And so my students, everyone gets a responsibility. They get a chance to be a leader, to be responsible, and they actually get several chances and opportunities. And if they fail at it, well, that's okay, because I am one person and I will probably not do as good of a job if I'm the one doing everything. Then I get very stressed out. So I think it's good to do that. They have a project that's usually due by the end of the week, assigned on a Monday, and so on and so on. So these are ways that you can manage your time and keep students responsible. With Google Documents, you can send reminders so they know when there's a test coming up, when a project is due. Some other ideas, and you can find so many more. You can find starter sheets, you can find touchable tutorials, all this kind of great information in the bookmarks. But here are some ideas to an activity log for each station. If they're have free time, and they're going to have free time, the trick is always keep them busy. And if they're not, Voltaire used to say, if you're busy, then you're not getting in trouble. And I think that that's true for the most part. So your students, I have them sign activity logs. If they're going to be in the game station, then they have to tell me what time, the date, what they did, what they learned. And then there's someone in charge of cleanup and things like that. Um, Teacher, you can find also the cup system, which is you have a yellow cup, a blue cup, and a red. Whichever is at the top tells you if they're okay, if they need help. And finally, the most important tip is to have fun. It's really important that your students see that you enjoy teaching, because it also shows that you enjoy learning, and learning is fun. And if the worst thing that happens is, and I'm being sarcastic, of course, or facetious, but if your students walk out of your classroom and they think that learning English, learning math, learning science, learning whatever you teach has been fun for the day, then you have done a great service, because they will want to come back and they will want to learn more. You can do this by creating a digital sandbox, having them play with different tools, and get them to have a lot of choices in what they make, and in freedom. You can do a lot of assessment through rubrics. You can find a lot in my books, Learning to Go. So with that in mind, the most important part of integrating technology effectively is actually you and your how you decide to engage your students, and how you also include the parents. And you can use technology in all kinds of ways. You can learn about it. You can get really excited to use different tools. And if you need any help, then you can always reference the more than 200 slide shares. You can go and you can try many of these different ideas, and don't get overwhelmed. You don't have to know it all. Every day I'm still learning. There are so many different tools, and it's really hard to keep track of everything. But if you find something that you do and you like doing it and you do it well, then that can be great. If your win for the year is that you did 2 projects with technology, then that's fantastic. Or even if you did one, because that was a lot better or an improvement from maybe the year before. So as long as we're always improving ourselves, I think that that's great. So thank you so much. You can connect with me on any of these social networks, and you can find the recording